I was talking with my dad, and he shared with me how you've been using compression planning, and I think that there's something there that a lot of other people, I mean, outside of the industry that you're in, could learn a few things.
Mm-hmm.
Would you mind giving me a recap? Just, I've heard it secondhand from my dad. How exactly are you using compression planning?
So I would say there's two primary ways we're using it, and I'm the vice president over consulting services working for Rich Grijalva, who is really the advocate to start compression planning for the team, probably about 4 or 5 years ago, maybe now it's been, and it really is a centerpiece of our consulting practice as far as gathering information. So we do it in two ways. From a sales perspective, a lot of times we will go in for a 3 to 4 hour, what I would call, it is absolutely a sales call, but it's really more about us understanding them than them understanding all the software we have. So the idea behind it is really to show that we're listening and gathering information. So depending on the actual thing that they're purchasing from MedSeek, we will go in and we will set up header cards that are going to be really about kind of what are they looking to gain out of, what is their problem, what is the solution, what is the result they want to have out of this. And this is a way to, and we use compression card headers, while we don't go through necessarily the background checking that we would on what I'll speak to later, but it's really about, we know why we're there, so we kind of formulate the background of what we're trying to explore, but we go in there with an opportunity to really use it as a tool to get people focused on the job at hand of gathering that information. And more than anything else, it's the process that drives the success, because typically when people go in to sell something, all they're doing is show and tell of everything they can do. We turn it on its heels by really listening to them and gathering information, then showing what we can do for them based on the information they told us. So
if you were to kind of put it into it, I mean, it sounds to me like needs assessment 101.
It is. That is a great idea. It is a needs assessment 101, but I would say more importantly, it's really about them talking, because some of them might be in the room that have never really talked about it as well. So it's about needs assessment. It's also about, I would also say it's education in the sense, because we use it when they do say something, we'll provide education about one of their comments of what's happening in the industry. And then it would also be an opportunity for their team to go together so they could see how we operate once they do select MedSeek. They see the process we go through to gather information quickly.
Do you have you gotten it to the point where it's almost like a turnkey template, or are they customized for each call that you make?
I would say 90% are going to be the same.
Okay.
There's probably 10% that we want to be more specific for the actual client. As far as understanding why exactly, before we get there. Because, obviously they've been through a sales process. When I'm coming in, it's typically further down the sales process road where they have budget, they have the initiative, they have the budget, they might be down to 2 or 3 vendors when I come in. So we already know a little bit about them through the year-long sales cycle through our traditional sales team.
Okay.
When I come in, it's usually I want to gather a little bit more information and then move it forward. But it is probably maybe 80 at worst, but usually 90% the same as far as the headers.
Are they process-driven questions? Or are they content?
Both. They're actually both. So one of our products is called a patient portal. And the patient portal, it is a content where a patient can go online and get their health information, or they can pre-register for the hospital, or they can send a doctor a message online. Well, that is very heavy process. How is it going to impact their organization? So we do some process telling us what is workflow like today. So we'll do very procedural, setting up the procedures, having them give us the procedures of what takes place. And then we have other parts of it where there's a lot of feature functionality. They can't take it on, so we try to drive out of them what is the key feature functionality they're looking for, and then we use the team to prioritize.
Okay.
So I'd say it's both. So once we get the features and the functions and we prioritize, then I'll move into the procedure piece. Okay, now, and what I tell them is I'm looking for red flags. I'm looking for areas that we might need to go in and do some change management or some other areas, from a tertiary level.
Yep.
And I would say that's the sales process. And I can't. I have countless times where people have come up to me and asked me, tell me more about your process. I've never seen anything like this before. I mean, it really does differentiate us from a sales perspective when we do it.
I have a good friend of mine has a branding and marketing company, and he's labeled his kind of, I'll just say that his needs assessment as a phase 0 when he goes in and works with a client.
Mm-hmm.
And he just told me the other day, over 100 of these sessions with clients. And it almost seals the deal.
Yeah, it does, because and again, I'm using it as a conversation piece. So if I was to say, is it 100% true compression planning I would say we take it all the way up to, I don't go into the communication round for this stage. I don't go to communication, but I go right up to that piece.
You develop an action plan with them.
Typically, I do. I typically do. I would say not 100%. Again, it depends how much time we have. Usually only have anywhere from 90 minutes to maybe 2 hours. So I don't have a lot of time, but it's just enough to get to that point. What are the next steps?
Let me ask you another question. Do you remember the first? I'm thinking for people who, again, can learn from this and basically adapt their industries. Remember the first time you ever used compression planning with a client?
Oh, man. It's been so many years now. I could tell you the first time that I recognized that it was a major success was no doubt was probably Spectrum Health in the Midwest up in Grand Rapids.
Okay.
That was probably the first sale in the sales. Now, I will tell you there's a whole other area where I use compression planning more. Right now we're just speaking about sales side of the house. I would say from, the Spectrum Health situation was an organization, heavy competitive bid. My CEO asked me to come in and do a workshop with him, and that was the first time that I said, okay, I'm going to do this solely with compression planning that I can remember. And I'm sure I've done it. I might have done it before earlier, but that one comes to mind just because of the magnitude of that deal size at the end of the day. It was a multi-million-dollar deal for MedSeek at the end of the day.
Yep.
We didn't seal it that day, but even when you talk to the CIO and some of the team members years later, they remember that meeting. So it was so unique and different than others. They said the two vendors before us came in, we're telling them what it needs to do and how the product works, and we went in there really listening to them and understanding their organization, and then adapted to how we could help solve their issues.
If you were to think back on that experience, before you got there and did the session with them, during and then after, how'd you feel in each of those three? How'd you feel going into it?
Well, going into it, I'm fairly confident in front of people, so I felt that I was confident enough to have a discussion with them, but maybe logistically I didn't know how everything was going to work. I would say that was probably the feeling of just there's that unknown where you don't know. During it, quite honestly, it flew by, because one of the things that compression planning does for me is I know my next question because of the next header. So I don't get off track, and it keeps me in line of being able to say, okay, I know at the end of this day that I will cover everything I needed to before I got there because I finished the headers. Now, obviously, sometimes we'll create new headers as we go in there, as we discover something. But that, I would definitely say that I was able to accomplish all of the major topics, and this is still to the day. I mean, it's still a major piece that I tell people who get out of compression planning of where it helps me is it keeps me on track for the meeting of what I need to accomplish. Because, a lot of times before compression planning, you might have all your notes, and you just don't cover everything because you forgot about something, and that one little thing could have been a big deal. And then afterwards, because of that project, immediately we knew it was successful. Immediately the fact that we got more data in probably that 90 minutes to 2 hours than the whole sales process had up to that point, really, really helped. Quite honestly, that organization even hired me to do compression planning, nothing on the subjects that I even work on. They just said, hey, we just want you to do the process.
Yeah. We find that people learn it in their capacity. Excuse me. And then they're called out in all sorts of other directions that have absolutely nothing to do with their day-to-day.
Correct, and that happens at MedSeek internally. So our team who have been trained, most of the team members have been trained, not most, but I'd say half of my team has been trained by you guys. And they get called. We get called all the time. Hey, can you come to run my business meeting? It's a pretty important meeting. I'd like to have someone come in. to do the planning. So again, I would say compression planning, or at least the process. Again, we've adapted the process as necessary internally, but overall, I would say compression planning, or the technique of compression planning, has absolutely is throughout our organization as far as a process that people talk about. Not everyone knows how to do it yet, but I would say majority of the people in the organization have heard about it. They see the boards laying around the offices, and they see when they come out what's happening.
So you're taking boards to client sites whenever
Correct. I rent them from Storyboards.
Yep.
So Kim's always said, you guys do it so much. Why don't you buy your own? It's more the convenience factor, to be honest with you. It's like, I don't want to deal with it.
The warehousing, the shipping, the picking up, the cleaning. We do the same thing. I mean, that's why I was so glad that Kim and Bob bought the business when they did.
Yeah.
We do the same thing. We rent and ship, and it's ideal.
Yeah, absolutely. As far as that's probably the sales process of MedSeek, and I would say that doesn't happen as often as the pure consulting of MedSeek. So, my consulting team, we have a very we're very process oriented in the sense of we have a methodology of a subject we're consulting on. Typically, most of the work is going to be working with senior level executives at hospitals. So CIOs, CEOs, CFOs, really most of the C-level, and probably one tier down of understanding their strategies and then developing what we call digital tactics. How are you going to really transfer that to the online world? And I would say that there isn't a consulting opportunity that goes by that we do not use compression planning in some sense of the word or the technique. We do millions a year in it, so it is a formalized technique that we use. That the leads use, and then we have, and then anything that comes up from a change management perspective, then again we'll adopt what we're going after. So the topic might be different. The process we go through is the same of how we gather the data.
Now you've mentioned, I know that I could think of some of the guys who have gone through. The one guy who used to work down at Disney specifically.
Yep, Bob Cushman. He does.
How are you working as teams when you do this? How do you support each other? Success-wise.
A little bit of both. So sometimes we always our consultant teams always go out in pairs at a minimum. Sometimes many more, obviously, depending on the size of the deal. Sure. Typically, one of them is going to be trained. The other is, they know the process because they participate by writing the cards or doing the. Typically, the person who's presenting is also doing the pinning, just because of the small team. And I would say from a process standpoint, typically we have one person who's the card person. And then one person who's the facilitator and pinner. And the facilitator pinner is the one who's responsible for making the headers, planning for the process. Sometimes we'll do
you? Are you normally doing it, or do other?
Everyone really does. I mean, I will say that when I'm typically when I'm out, I always am the one who's usually the lead facilitator. If Bob goes out, he'll use it. Jim is another one who's been trained. Paul, they will go out. Christy and Deb, they've been formally trained, so they will go out and do it themselves if I'm not around. If I am around, they'll be the writer, typically. And that's really more of my role of being the facilitator, being the one who's up front. It's not that they can't, and they do it when I'm not there. So
that's how my dad and I are. I'm usually in that lead print slot where capturing all the ideas.
Mm-hmm. So it works very well for us, no doubt.
How is it received from a prospective client when you come in and you've got everything set up? I have to imagine it's something that they haven't seen before. What kind of feedback do you get from them walking in?
Well, it's very funny when we first walk in because they see us as a high-tech company. And when we walk in, they're envisioning we're going to have all these computer slides, PowerPoints, blah, blah, blah. And when they see these boards, I've had plenty of them say, "Man, low tech," and I said, "It's the right tech," And so at first they're like, "What is all this?" And and again, I explain it to them. I explain the background, why we do it, how it's going to work, And I will tell you, more than anything else about it, it's the fact that they can visually see their comment. That's probably the most powerful thing about it, is they see that you've captured their idea. Because if you don't write down their idea, they'll tell you. But that's a great idea. It's a great way of keeping them engaged. And I'll make and I do, again, facilitate where I make jokes that I sometimes make a joke of, hey, if you don't like me, my job's here to get the information, not for you to like me. I mean, make it in a funny way, or I'll say, hey, if you're not participating, I'm going to call you out, so be ready. And I will do that. And then I've used, when I have someone who's overly talkative, typically I'll hold them out during the priority plan, when we're bubbling up or bubbling out. Just to kind of keep them aside, or I'll give them a different color to go last. I've done a different techniques. Again, that's more about I think that's less compression planning, more facilitating at that point. How do you keep them out? How do you control that one who's taking over the conversation?
I remember when you went through the workshop, and it has been, I'm thinking it's been more than 4 or 5 years.
It's been a while, yeah. I'm not really sure exactly when it was, but it's been a while.
And I don't even know if you can remember pre-compression planning, how you went about doing business. That's funny you say that, because you kind of don't remember, and I don't remember not doing this anymore. I would say it was very interview-like sessions. Probably it was very rarely was I having large group meetings. So more one-on-one.
It was more one-on-one, longer periods of time to get the information, because I wouldn't be able to do a short, quick hit and get everyone in the room. So I would say that was probably we still do that today. I mean, when it's appropriate, we still do the one-on-one sessions, obviously. But I would say we probably did a lot more of it and a lot less of group dynamic planning.
If you were to look at the time savings, is there any way that you can? It's probably impossible to quantify, but your sales cycle, your sales close cycle, time-wise, what kind of edge has compression planning given you?
So I wouldn't say, so usually, again, it's coming, when we institute compression planning, or when I come in to help the sales team with it, typically we're already been through a sales cycle. So I wouldn't say it's closed the time as much as has given us an opportunity to be the vendor of choice, more likely than not. So again, when I'm coming in from the sales perspective, it's typically, there's 2 or 3 vendors still left.
Okay.
And I would say when we come in and do it, again, we don't do it in every sales situation, because I'm not on the sales team. But when it's a very competitive situation and they really want subject matter experts at the table and to differentiate ourselves even more so, that's when I come in. And I would say we're probably 80 to 90% win rate at that point.
So once it's down to the select few, you're getting an 80 to 90%.
Yeah, probably. We're pretty accurate when I come in to do that. Now, again, that doesn't mean there's all kinds of other things that go into that, obviously, but there's no doubt that it differentiates us when we do it. And and we don't do it. I wouldn't say we do it, a lot. And the reason why we don't do it a lot is because it's very expensive from a sales cycle perspective. So we do it when, again, highly competitive deal. We do it when, maybe we're losing the deal and we feel like this is worth the investment to make sure we win it.
Is it a dollar amount that determines? I mean, we'll go in on an X dollar amount, or how do you determine when to do it?
It is typically a dollar amount. It's typically a couple things that we would say. One, that we have executive buy-in to the project. Maybe not MedSeek, but at least to the project, so we can get them there.
Okay.
2, I would say it's usually going to be anywhere from above 800,000 probably now, maybe $1 million when we come in.
Okay.
So it's a pretty large deal size for MedSeek.
Yeah.
And I would say, now again, this is on the sales side. On the other side, we do it even for a $20,000 engagement, $10,000 engagement. We usually do it still. So we really do use it in every engagement on the consulting side.
Okay.
The sales side, again, it's not every sale. It's going to be the big, highly competitive, high dollar targets. If it's a $200,000 deal, I'm not going to be involved, because again, it's going to be They're not going to bring in a large team to do something like that because, you have travel. We're sending 3 or 4 people out who are not, are typically billable people. They're not going to be billable in this sense.
Yep.
Bob does a lot of sales for consulting, so he will do it more so for trying to sell consulting.
Okay.
And again, he's doing it when he gets the relationship with the executive team. Because again, if you're doing it with a lower, with just general staff, you're not gonna, they're not gonna be. It's not gonna have. They're impressed, but obviously we need to impress the higher ups in the organization.
If you were to look at internal to MedSeek and external in your consulting, your day-to-day consulting as well as the sales, how often do you think compression planning sessions are going on?
In consulting, for the consulting team, and there's a team of about 9 to 10 people, and maybe not that much, about that, maybe 7 to 8 people. I would say that consulting takes place, or we're doing compression planning 50% of the time, if not more, on the roads.
Okay.
Oh, actually more. We're definitely doing it more.
Okay.
I would say on internally to MedSeek, maybe 10%, 20% of the time.
Okay.
Going on at some point. Now we also have another team. MedSeek acquired an organization about 9 months ago, and they have not been trained in compression planning. But we actually use compression planning, which is probably we were very concerned about. Whenever there's an acquisition, people are nervous. They're looking for jobs, even though there's going to be a job there for them. But it's just that whole insecurity piece. And
Sure.
we use compression planning to quickly learn the IP as fast as we could. And I don't think of any other way we could have done it without doing compression planning. And so now in our office in Wisconsin, they have the boards there, so they will use it not correctly, but because they haven't been trained, but they're trying to use the technique as much as they possibly can based on what I did out there. So I would say they actually use it quite a bit out there as a visual way of gathering data.
There's just something, if you take the structured process off the table and just use it as a way of displaying your thinking, just capturing everything, it really helps.
Absolutely.
It helps people think.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Let me ask you something. If you were to, what advice would you have for others thinking about using compression planning with their clients? Maybe they've, like on the front end.
Yeah, I would say stay with it. So, I was very fortunate that it worked the first time. But I would definitely say the way I do a compression planning today has changed from 5 years ago. There's no doubt that I've learned, I'm not going to call them shortcuts, but more efficiencies for me of where I'm going to. And I would say it's one of those things that you really need to give it a chance to learn your style or to work it within your style of facilitation. And nothing else, the headers are the key. The key piece is those headers, developing those header cards before you go in there will help you keep track. So I would say that would probably be the most important thing. Spend some time on your first time with the header cards and then stay with it, because your header cards will change, especially in a sales process. You're probably doing the same header cards over and over again, but you might change it based on what you're hearing over a period of time.
Did you ever use the design alert service?
You know what? One time we did a long time ago, and actually I did not, but one of my colleagues did, and and I did once myself actually. I did do it once at the very beginning, and again, it was probably just to kind of get my head around how to do it. But it's one of those things that I've been doing it for so long now that we're very templated at this point of what our header cards are going to be in a situation. So we've learned by experience, and we've had time to do it. But I would recommend it to anybody who has that period. But we did have that. We did use it once. I recall the time when it was being used.
Have you ever had any failures using compression planning?
The only one I would say was a failure, and it really wasn't a failure because of compression planning. One time I was in Canada, and the boards got caught up in customs, so I had all my supplies and no boards, and I used tape on a chalkboard. So I ripped up paper, and I still used it. So I taped things up into the wall and still went with it. But I would say that was the only time that I would say was, what do we do here? And I just improvised, and it worked fine.
We had a training workshop down in Brazil, and it was like a last-minute thing put together, and we shipped all the supplies down, all the boards, all the notebooks, everything. Customs went on strike.
Oh.
Our instructor got down there, and thankfully he'd taken a notebook with him. He's able to photocopy everything. So yeah, I could feel your pain there.
Yeah, but it worked out well. So I do now. I've learned from that situation. I make sure I get my boards down there 2 days before the meeting, so it gives us a day to find them if they get caught up in a warehouse. Those are things you learn over time. Because there's been other times it's been close call where it goes to a shipping dock at the hospital, and it never gets to the room, and we're spending the first hour or so finding the boards and things of that nature. So I've learned stuff like that over time. Yeah, the boards can get kind of expensive over a period of time if you're doing it out of pocket. Since most of it is billed back to the client, I would say if someone's, I would recommend someone have their own fold-up boards.
Yep.
From a cost perspective, if they really are going around. Internally at MedSeek, we probably have 10 boards laying around the different offices. So we're fine there. It's just when we go on the road.
That's my buddy Brian, who does the Phase Zero. I think he's up to about 15 to 20 boards.
Oh, wow.
And he uses the rental when he's on the road, but he also there's a conference center right down the road that he just puts them in the back of his truck and takes them there.
That's a great idea. Yeah, so we actually rent a van when we're on the road. People pull up in these big minivans so we can tug them around the different places.
That's what we do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just a few more. You kind of mentioned the one session. If you were to look back and say this is it's a mountaintop CP experience for me, what would you say has been your gold medal session? Can you talk about that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. Gold moment session.
Gold medal.
You know what? I would probably say there was one session that down in New Orleans one time where I was warned going into the meeting that these 3 doctors that were going to be there will probably give me 10 minutes before they get their words pissed off. That's exactly words they used to me, and probably walk out and just don't worry about it. It's just normal for these guys to never like any presenter. They really warned me going into it that just ignore them when they do it. They do it all the time to every vendor, or every consultant that comes in here, And when we were done after 2 hours, they stayed the whole time. One of them actually walked up to me and said that was the most impressive thing I've ever seen as far as a meeting of collecting data. So I wouldn't say it was a moneymaker gold session, but it was knowing that I'm going to have a difficult audience and that they really did stay engaged, and they were very engaged. And then obviously the people afterwards coming to me and saying how amazing that was that they stayed and the like. I would say that's up there. And I would say that's happened to me a number of times. I didn't know I had those type of people in the audience until afterwards.
Yeah.
People come up and it's like, man, how did you get that person to talk? Or that's amazing that's happened. I mean, it just happened at Banner Health, where I had an organization that, they're like, tell me more about the session. Again, I have it happen all the time. Where did you learn this? What's the technique? How do you do it? And again, it just differentiates us so much in the marketplace. And going back to your time savings, on the consulting side, I would say it probably saves multiple trips to an organization. So time from that way, I know for a fact that before we had compression planning, we would spend 2 days in an organization for a topic. Now we can get it done in 4 to 5 hours.
Okay.
So, we've probably cut our time in half from a consulting standpoint that I should mention as well.
That's...
And consulting time is money, obviously.
Absolutely. You'd also mentioned that you're probably using it maybe 10 to 20% internally with probably different departments.
Correct.
Is there a major use for it? Is there a common theme that people are asking you to come in and help?
It's going to be strategic planning. So what are we going to do over the next year, 2 years, 3 years type planning? That's typically when we're called in by the other departments. I would say that's probably the most common theme. It's usually not disagreements or processes. It really is typically around strategic planning. Every year there's a big sales or organizational meeting that typically someone on my team is invited to work with the various departments, kind of, how are they going to plan for the year.
Yep.
And then the interesting thing is again, then the carry through and the follow through, and then coming back, 6 months later and looking at it. Did we accomplish our 6 months goals? Or now let's look at 12, 18 months. Or do we have to change, and the like? And so I would say it's used a lot there. There was a period of time when we're going through any major process redesign or capturing of data. About 8 months ago, we went through the entire delivery organization using compression planning to do what we call a work breakdown structure, understand exactly all of the different processes and steps people take. So you probably had over 100 people come through the various sessions where we were doing documentation across the company. So that was a major initiative we did that we use compression planning as the technique.
Very cool.
Yeah, so
we've done a couple of ones like that, and they're just, your head just kind of spins in the middle of them, but at the end it always seems to work.
Absolutely, and we took that on the show. So we went to all of our different offices. I mean, it was a very large undertaking at MedSeek, very expensive from a time perspective, but we had to find out where our process breakdowns were happening, and that was it. Because we have so many different products, and a lot of them need to speak to each other. And we were having a lot of delivery issues. And so we're trying to find out where is our breakdown at, where is our communication breakdown, and how do we improve it.
Yep. So you're up to about 300 employees?
I want to say we're just past over 300, correct?
I'm trying to think of how many when Rich came on.
There was probably about 60, 50, maybe 70.
Yeah.
Probably, when he came onto the team.
That's great.
Yeah, when I joined, there was about 40. So we do expect to probably hire another 50 this year. I mean, actually, I apologize. By the end of this year, on our current growth path, we'd be at 100 more employees by the end of the year. So, I mean, our growth path is pretty dynamic right now.
So just a non-CP related question.
Mm-hmm.